Hi, I'm Todd Nauck. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I wanted to draw Miles Morales from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Really looking forward to that movie, and so I got a 3" by 3" red post-it note here, and I thought it'd be fun to draw a hooded Miles Morales. So let's flip the camera around and get to drawing. Okay, so I have the 3" by 3" post-it note here, and I'm using a Pentel Twist Erase mechanical pencil with 0.5 HB lead. So I want to rough in the structure of the head. So I want to draw in the full skull and the jawline face before I start to add in the hood here. So you'll see, knowing where the full head is makes it easier and more accurate to draw the hood so it fully covers the head. I wouldn't want to draw the face and then try to draw a hood shape around what I think would be the head. It's easier if I know exactly where the head is. So always draw all the way through. Draw the entirety of the head, then add your hood on there. Then I have the eye line, so I know where the eyeballs would be, so I can put the lenses on so that they're in the right place, so the eyes are not set too high or too low, or at least the lenses are not set too high or too low to where it wouldn't be believable where the eyes would be seen. Okay, so just a little more detail here on the lenses and on the hood. Just want to get enough detail so I know what to ink. These are fairly loose pencils, but it gives me enough information that I know what lines I'll want to use when I get to the inking stage coming up here pretty soon. So just a few more lines just to kind of double check everything. So now I'm coming in with the Pigma Micron multi-liners. I'm using the 08 here, so starting with the foreground, which is this outer part of the hood, and just getting the lines in, getting a nice sense of depth with the lines. Don't really need too heavy of line weights because most of everything here on Miles Morales is on the same sort of plane. It's all here in the foreground. There's no real background or other characters to delineate depth, but there is still a sense of depth with the hood that overlaps the face, which overlaps the neck, and then we have the shoulder. So I do keep these things in mind. Usually light comes from above, so a lot of my thicker lines will probably be on the lower parts of anything here on Miles. Like you can see there on the outer right-hand side of the hood towards the lower part, it's a little thicker and gets a little thinner up towards the top. So a lot of this has just been experimental, sort of trial and errors, kind of seeing what works, what doesn't work in my study and practice of my inking style. Your style may vary, but keeping in mind kind of where the light source is and the shadows, and also the form and structure of the object that you're drawing, whether it be the face, the hood, the jacket, the shoulder, the wrinkles. These are going to be things that come into play, come into mind when we're doing our inking. And seeing kind of what works, what doesn't work. I studied a lot of my favorite inkers to see how they would approach each element of whatever thing was being illustrated, whether it be the figure work, the costumes, textures. So much to look at, so much to consider. It's kind of the arsenal you kind of put in your head by continued study and practice. Okay, so just finishing off the trim around his lenses here. Now when I'm doing the details, like here on the wrinkles of his jacket, here on the back of where the neck would be, I like to keep those lines a little thinner than I would the outer contour lines, oftentimes, just so that when I'm doing the smaller detail lines, like here on the hood, the little kind of wrinkles, I like those lines to be a little thinner than the thicker contour or shape lines, just so that it doesn't overpower, doesn't get muddy, and also gives the viewer eye a little more eye candy to play with. It gives you different things to look at, thick and thin lines. Okay, now for some erasing with the Art Gum Kneaded Eraser. I often use the Mars plastic eraser, as you've seen in many of my past videos, but I've now incorporated the Art Gum Kneaded Eraser. I feel that oftentimes it can be a little bit better when erasing pencil lines, but not pulling up the ink from the Micron, which some erasers can do. Not to say that Art Gum never does it, but it does it a bit less. Okay, now it's time for some Copic color, Copic sketch markers here. Starting with the N27, using the N27 as kind of a base red on top of this base red of the paper, this red paper of this post-it note. So I'm keeping a good chunk of the the paper color as a base color, a highlight, so that my initial red here is almost actually a different a shading sort of approach. Keeping in mind the folds of the hoodie, and reference hoodies, gang. When you're drawing a person in clothing or hoodie, look up that clothing item and see how it fits on a real person, and you can utilize those shapes in your illustration. Coming in with some R56 for some darker shades, especially considering where the light source is coming from above, putting the darker shades on the lower opposite side of where the light would be coming from, and working with the wrinkles there, keeping the folds in mind as I color with these shades of red. Now to tackle the mask, or no, I'm sorry, the jacket, coming in with some neutral gray 2 here initially for the base, a base shade. I felt that was a little too light, so I'm going to bump that up to a neutral gray 4, going over that. And I kind of feel that the neutral gray 4 isn't quite as dark as I'd like it to be, which is okay because I can come in a little bit darker with this neutral gray 6. Neutral gray 6, now I'm getting the kind of the darker shade that I was desiring and looking for. But since I went light, darker, what I'll want to do is come in back with this neutral gray 2, and I'll blend all these shades of gray together so I get more of a seamless transition from the dark to the light. Okay, so just working this neutral gray 6 here just a little bit more, and now coming in with that neutral gray 2 to blend it all together. Okay, next up are the lenses here, and I have a trick for coloring white portions of a character here on a colored post-it note. So my initial approach is to use some darker shades here for the lens. So I'm using a cool gray 5, then shading in through with a little cool gray 2, and I want to add a little purple, some V06. So these are darker than what I would use if this were on a piece of white paper, but when I move to my next step later on here in the video, you'll see why I went darker there. And now for the mask, I'm using some cool gray 8, using a darker shade because I want it to be almost black, but not quite black for the black of his mask. So getting a good chunk of it as cool gray 8 for a darker shade for the mask. And then I'm going to come in with some lighter shades here in the open portion that I've left that I can blend into. So I'm using some cool gray 6 now. Cool gray 6 to blend that 8 into finishing out his mask. So it's nice and dark, but we still get a little bit of shape and form of his face. Now some cool gray 4 to put some realistic shadows here in the red parts of his hoodie and his mask. Always keeping in mind where the light source is, where the shadows would fall on the opposite side. One thing I like about the Copic Sketch markers is with this brush tip I can get these little shapes and work the wrinkles and shadows and color. You know, I can really sculpt the shapes and color as I desire with the brush tip, which is really nice. Now let's work on the sky here. So I wanted to go with a night sky, so I'm starting with some B97 here, a darker shade of blue at the top. And I felt I wanted a little bit darker. I wanted a little bit of a darker shade, so I'm bringing in some B18. And so some portions up here, just a little bit. I'm going to shade lighter as I go down towards the bottom of the horizon here. So some B04 now, going over the B97 and B18 I'd applied, blending it all through, letting the inks mix. So now some purple here, some V04, pulling from that blue down, further down towards the ground. And I'm switching it up to, no, I'm still using the V04. Just really getting that blending in. The more I go over those other colors, the more it kind of all the ink sort of blends together for a nice watercolor sort of effect. Now here for the bottom towards the horizon, some RV13. It's more of a pink shade, and I thought it was kind of nice to bring that blue down into purple, down into pink, adding a little bit of that pink here into the red of his hoodie as well to kind of tie it all together. Now remember that trick I told you I was going to mention here later in the video? This is it. I color over the grays I'd laid down with this white pencil. So we get a sense of the white of his lens, but we still have that red and these gray shades peeking through. So we get a sense of the color of the post-it note underneath. Now you could go in with white paint or a gel pen if you want a real vibrant white. Sometimes I do that. But for here I wanted something more subtle, so I like using these Derwent, what is this called? Derwent Inktense white pencil. And using a little bit here on the outer edges of his hoodie, just as a highlight. Same here on the jacket, just a little bit right around the edges, just giving us a little light onto his clothing. Not a lot, just a little bit of something. Kind of smudge it there with a finger so it's nice and subtle. So that takes care of that portion of his of the process. Now it's time to draw in the webs on his mask. So I'm using a Jelly Roll white gel pen, which works really well over the Copic marker and on this paper. And it gives me a nice thin line. I'll be using a different white pen here a little bit, or gel pen later on, but right now for the webs, want a nice thin line, and the Jelly Roll white gel pen works well for that. So I've drawn the spider webs on a Spider-Man's mask so much that I don't even really need guidelines. I've done it so many times. I kind of know the structure of the way I want those webs to go, that I can just jump right in with a more permanent sort of ink here. But I guess that's what happens when you practice something over and over and over again. It just becomes part of your arsenal and becomes second nature, which is a great thing about practice. Now let's drop in some stars here and make this a starry night. Just dotting them in different little clusters as best as possible. Some bigger, some smaller. And then fewer as we get further down to what would be the skyline, where the light of the city is so bright that we can't see quite as many stars. All right, now I'm going to bring in my other gel pen that I like to use. It's the Uniball Signo white gel pen. It's a bit thicker, gives me a bit thicker of a line, which is great for when I do my signature outlines around the perimeter of the character. Just bringing that right up to the inked line, trying not to lose the line weights, trying to maintain those. And then, so the Uniball Signo white gel pen has a bit of a different flow than the Jelly Roll white gel pen. So I utilize those two different gel pens depending on what it is I need to achieve for the image that I'm working on in that given moment. Okay, so just a little bit more, just right here around the bottom of the hoodie. And even here with the outline, I still keep in mind at giving it putting little thicks and thins here and there. A little thicker parts here at the bottom of the hoodie where it might be a little thinner as we get up to top. Nothing too big, but just a little bit. Now I noticed in the Spider-Verse Miles Morales that the webs on his costume are not red like they are in the comic book. They're a little bit more silvery, a little bit more gray. So I'm coming in with some Cool Gray 4 initially for the base parts, or the parts that are underneath the hoodie or hidden by the hoodie. Places that are getting less light. Coming in with a little BV11. It's a little bit more of a purplish shade. And then I want just a little bit of a lighter purple. So I come in with some V01. Here it is, the V01, just a little bit, and going over the white ink here after it's completely dried. Mind you, make sure your gel pen ink is completely dry before adding some Copic marker to it so it doesn't smudge or get weird. So put a little signature on here. And this Miles Morales sketch, Post-it note sketch illustration is done. So yeah, there we go. Miles Morales, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man on a 3x3 inch red post-it note. Hopefully you had fun hanging out with me and drawing today. Make sure if you have a chance to, if you could leave a thumbs up and a comment. Always love to hear from y'all. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you're on the different social media networks, feel free to look me up. All of the links are in the video description below. Gang, thanks so much. Hope you have a great time, and hopefully you enjoy seeing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I know I'm looking forward to it. So thanks so much. Keep on drawing. Keep having fun.